everyone, and welcome to Americans for Limited Government live stream. Joining me today is Anna Mercaldi. I got that right. It's an Italian name. And Anna is from Connecticut. And the reason we're talking to Anna today is she's 24 years old. She's a recent college graduate. She's a professional working in her field, actually about to finish a master's degree. And she is what we're calling the new face of liberty. New polls are out showing that young people in New England are very much trending towards sort of the conservative values of limited government, and just smaller government is obviously what our organization is about. So Anna, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. Before I sort of get more into the poll numbers, just tell us a little bit about why you think so many of people in your generation and in New England, because that's the polls were focused on New England. Why do you think there is this sort of embracing of the individual liberties and freedoms?
I think COVID changed a lot of that for us. COVID allowed us to spend more time at home. And for my age group, that really meant more time in front of our phones, whether that's good or for bad. And with social media, everything's at our fingertips. Information, news, and between TikTok becoming pretty much our new form of, general news for my age group, you're going to see all different political platforms on there. You see conservatives, you see Democrats, and you see people in the middle. And I see that all over my feed, and I hear different perspectives. And I think that COVID really just pronounced that for my age group, and that really turned into people my age trying to become more informed, trying to become more educated on topics. And also because COVID really hit a lot of us financially. We did not benefit the middle-class Americans from COVID. We got hit extremely hard by this pandemic. We see gas is now double the price than it was 2 years ago. Groceries are exponentially increasing. We are having 7% inflation throughout, just our finances. That's ridiculous. We've never seen that in the history of our lives. And, when we're a group in college, a lot of us are financially independent and starting to be, we're going to care more about where our dollar is and want to know why, we're paying all these taxes and we're not seeing the return on our investment.
So I love what you're saying. And Anna, I'm going to show a full screen graphic. The Market Research Foundation recently polled young people, 18 to 26, and they asked the question, are you in agreement with this statement? As we address our nation's problems, we should think about what people can do to help themselves. 57% of young people in New England, that's New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, 57% of New England young people responded, yes, I agree with that statement. And they were the highest group of any place in the country. And I really like what you were saying a little bit ago, that may relate to the fact that New England is one of the most expensive regions of the country. And as you said, you all are really feeling that. You're starting to get out into the workplace. A lot of you are paying your way through college. So were you surprised by that, or do you agree with this statement?
Yeah, I think you should rely on no one but yourself to help yourself. If you need to be your own best friend, right? So I don't think you should be relying on government, to help you solve your problems. Yes, I do believe in some social services to extents to help get out of, hardships, right? Like being, if you're laid off from your job and being able to have some sort of financial services. I'm not 100% against those, but we shouldn't be allowing people to be reliant on those. We shouldn't be allowing people to not go back to work because we're giving them an extra $600 for being on unemployment like we did during the pandemic. That's unacceptable. We need to be reliant on ourselves. And I think that's what we saw. I think that's why that number is so high. I know so many people that, that age group were working those fast food jobs, were working those, essential jobs, at retail stores, at grocery stores. And, we didn't see any type of extra pay for working through the pandemic in most cases. Some companies did, some didn't. And we're working at home, risking our lives, risking our safety during a pandemic. At the time, there was no vaccines or anything like that. And then there's people that are getting laid off and making more money than us. And the government just kept handing out more money for them to sit at home. it was frustrating. It was frustrating to see that as someone who's never got the opportunity to work from home or anything like that. I've been working throughout the whole pandemic in office. And I have a chronic illness that put me at high risk for COVID. So that was extremely concerning to me, and I didn't get hazard pay. So I think that's huge. We can't rely on the government to help ourselves. And we saw that, I think, in the pandemic.
Interesting. Okay, so here's another poll. Well, it's the same poll, but different question. It does not matter if an illegal immigrant isn't causing problems in our society. If they came here illegally, they need to leave or go through the proper procedures to stay. And again, we found that the highest people in agreement with that were young people in New England. 70% of those polled in New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut said, yep, I agree with that statement. And then, so the next highest group was sort of the Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama at 69%. And then it went down from there. The lowest amount of support for that statement was in the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, California. They included Alaska and Hawaii. So I just was fascinated again by New England, young people there. Why do you think that they are? And first of all, let me ask you, do you agree with that statement that, you know, immigrants need to come here through the proper legal channels?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a granddaughter of immigrants. My grandparents traveled or came to America post World War II, seeking a better life. And obviously, the system back then, I'm very aware, was very different in the 60s and 70s than it is today. And I understand that. I'm not naive that the system is not the same today as it was 30, 40 years ago. However, we have laws. We are a country of laws. And if I break the law, I go to jail. That does not give a pass to anyone. Anyone that breaks the law needs to be penalized, and that includes coming to this country illegally. And I'm a strong believer in that we need to have strong immigration reform. I understand why people want to come here. I am a product of a person wanting to come here, and I am, fulfilling my grandparents' American dream, and I'm 100% on board on that. But we also, especially with coming out of this pandemic and being on the up and up, we need to also make sure we are knowing who's coming into this country, because we cannot allow what happened to us back in, 2019 when this pandemic hit. Or 2020, we cannot allow this to happen again. We need to know who's coming into our country and anything that they could potentially be bringing into this country.
And Anna, I asked you earlier if you follow a group that's real. In my view, I sort of identify this group with young people, but you can tell me whether that's too broad of a statement. Maybe not all young sort of libertarian or conservatives follow. But Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, he's been active for a number of years on college campuses and has been just widely, out there on social media. And I want to share a video that he did. And when I saw this, it's about 3 minutes. What struck me about it is this is the type of message that I grew up hearing from my father, who is probably like in your grandparents' generation, right? He was born in 1940. So this little video clip is something that I would have heard growing up as a child, but I wonder if it resonates today with the new generation. Do young kids hear these kinds of stories, and what's your reaction? So I'll just play this. So
let me tell you a story about one of the darkest days in American history, a day that was, quote, that will always live in infamy. I'm talking about Pearl Harbor, when Japan preemptively struck us on a sunny day in Hawaii, and they sunk the entire Pacific Fleet. Thousands of American soldiers died in 30 minutes or less. We did not declare war on the Japanese. They declared war on us. We didn't know what we were going to do, and all of a sudden, we didn't have just one war. We had 2 wars on our hands, because if we're at war with Japan, that means we're also at war in the European theater. America was scrambling. We didn't know what to do, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt gives the speech. This is a day that will live in infamy, and Congress almost unanimously votes for a declaration of war in both theaters. America was solemn, somber, confused, and looking for direction. But there was one man that was smiling on December 6th. And that man was the greatest man to live in the 20th century, a person that we've deleted from our textbooks and from our history. It's Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was the greatest man to live in the 20th century because he was built for that moment. They hated him before the war, and they hated him after the war. He wrote 50 books, and he understood the world better than anyone else. He called the Nazi scourge before it happened, while it happened, and during it, and was able to defeat it. But he was smiling that morning. Why was he smiling? He walked into his war cabinet, probably on 2 hours of sleep, with a little bit of whiskey and a little bit of a cigar, the way Winston Churchill always would. A smile a mile wide you'd think would be Christmas morning. And his war cabinet was distraught, almost crying. And they said, "Prime Minister, have you lost your mind? Why are you smiling?" And he's smiling. He says, takes a puff of his cigar. "We have won the war." And his war cabinet, his war minister shuffles his papers, says, "Sir, with all due respect, what do you mean we have won the war? Currently, they just bombed a church in North London. The Royal Air Force is losing 300 people a day. We barely got our troops out of Dunkirk. The opposition is planning a ground invasion of any moment at Brighton. We can't even field an army, let alone staff a navy. Our Air Force is a laughingstock against the Luftwaffe. What do you mean we have won the war?" Winston Churchill takes another puff of his cigar. He says, "I know the Americans. Once they awaken, it is over. We have won the war." And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, when we awaken and we contest for truth, the war is won. It is a matter of how bad we want it. It's in our spirit. If we wanted to retreat, we'd go to the French. If we wanted a day off, we'd go to Italy. If we wanted to sue for peace, we would go back to France. If we wanted to complain, we would go to the United Kingdom. If you want to win, you go to America. It's in our spirits, in our soul. It's who we are. We are going to win. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
So Anna, is that something that you relate to, or just give me your reaction to Charlie Kirk's sort of fiery message?
Yeah, I mean, I think Charlie is he's a controversial figure. I think in the conservative movement of my age, not everyone agrees with everything that he has to say, but just specifically talking about that one clip. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I grew up with, but I think my circumstances were extremely different, right? Not many people in my age group can say that their grandfather fought in World War II for Italy on the complete other side, and then had, them come here to the States for a better life. And I have a completely different perspective and a completely different appreciation for this country, knowing what my grandparents went through in Italy to get here. Not everyone has that perspective, and I think that might be why it's something that I heard of. And I think it's not heard enough in our generation. We're grateful that we have not had to live in a home front war, right? We've had the war in the Middle East, but we never really had anything in my age group on our home front. And you have to remember, I was 5 when 9/11 happened, and that's probably the most equivalent thing that we have for my generation. I was 5 and I barely remember that day. And I'm at top of this age bracket that you're looking at. So even there's some folks that are turning 19 and they were born in 2003. So they were born after 9/11 even was a thought. So, a lot of this, we hear through history, but I think living through it is a completely different thing, and it gives you a different appreciation for it. And I think that's something that we have to remind ourselves, is that we can put ourselves back as a country in those types of situations if we aren't pro-America and don't choose ourselves first. And it's troublesome that it's not prominent, but I definitely think it has to do with it not being in the forefront of our lives, right? I think my generation is if it's in your face, it's important. And if it's not in your face, it's not important, right? So this not having some type of conflict on our home base, I think, is the result in the pro-America, America first agenda sort of not always being talked about and sort of being forgotten. It's something that I always heard growing up, but I like I said, my how I grew up was completely different, and my situation was different just because of my family background.
Thank you for sharing that, Anna. And one of the other poll questions looked at what were the top priorities for young people. And the top priority in one of the polls said it was the economy. And then way down, I mean, not even close, was climate change, or, so that seems to be a shift, because I feel like over the last 30 years or so, climate change has really been driven by the younger generations, the focus on green energy. But these new polls are showing that young people are like, wait a minute, let's talk about the economy first. And I think that sort of gets to your point. I mean, you all are recognized, you're living in this age of inflation that we haven't seen for 40 years. And maybe that's what's causing you to have a greater focus on the bottom line and the dollars?
Yeah, I think, I mean, at least the way I look at it, I don't negate that, there is issues environmentally that we need to take care of. I don't negate that at all. But I sort of like, it's like, what's the priorities right now?
Yeah.
And it's like, if we can't take care of our present self now, we can't think about ourselves long term. And I think that there's a lot of economics involved in climate change when you're looking at policy making and incentives and, different types of programs that the government has. It's all tied into economics, right? And how these big corporations function. So I think like how I would logically explain it is that let's, get our current economy settled. Let's actually fix the problems that we have with it currently. And then once we have a better grip on that, then let's go attack the long-term problems, right? And it's like, we can't be too, 20, 30 years, as important as it is, and as important it is to, make sure that we set up success for, our children and grandchildren's generation. 100% think that's important, but we can't do that without our generation being successful. And I think that is why the economy is on the forefront of issues for people in my age group.
And you and I were talking a little bit earlier off camera that when we talk about conservative values or the America First agenda, it doesn't necessarily mean one party like the Republican Party. You're very clear about that in your generation, you all don't necessarily like identify strongly with either party. Is that right? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I would say that a good chunk of us are more libertarian, independent, as in we like a little bit of both, right? We're not too extreme. We're in the middle. And a lot of it is just more like logic. We feel like we've just lost a lot of logic and common sense in the policies that we're making, the laws that are out there. It just lack common sense. And people laugh at my generation of being, stupid or, ignorant or whatever it may be. But I beg to differ. I'm surrounded by extremely successful young adults, and we care about our future. We want to be involved. I think just how we get our information and how we share our information is a little bit different than maybe some other generations, which scares people. But at the end of the day, we still all want what's best. We want, growth for our economy. We want, strong allyship with other countries. We want a strong, military and, all those fundamentals. We want to be able to protect ourselves with the Second Amendment. There's a lot of people that believe in that, but those are the more important things to us, I would say. And how we might express that is just a little bit different now in the age of technology.
Thank you, Anna. This is a quote that sort of sums up what Market Research Foundation found in their polls. Gen Z's views are a lot more nuanced than the mainstream media would have us believe, and many are open to conservative policies, especially in culturally distinct New England. And Anna, I think that goes exactly with what you were just saying. Your political views are nuanced. You're not sort of in a box of Republican, Democrat. I mean, you all are trying to sort of look at politics in a whole new way, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I just don't think the two-party system agrees with people in my generation. I think that's what it comes down to. The two-party system is old and is going to be distinct, I believe, within my lifetime. Like I said, I think you find a lot of us that we don't care who you go home with at the end of the day. That doesn't affect me. But don't take my guns away. Don't tell me what needs to be done with my money. Don't tell me how I should be living my life and what I should be doing. And I won't tell you how you should live yours, which is pretty much the forefront of libertarianism, of individual freedoms and limited government. But that's also the true fundamentals of being a Republican and a conservative is limited government.
Right. So there's a lot of overlap there.
Correct. Yeah. I think it extends past the fiscalness, and we like a lot of us will put it into the social, like we don't care what you do outside of like in your four doors of your home. If you choose to do whatever, do it. But don't tell me that I can't have this type of gun in my house to protect me and my family. Don't tell me that like I should be putting my tax dollars here.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's awesome. It totally makes sense. And that's why I'm calling you the new face of liberty. Young people in America today are really embracing freedom, individual liberties, And I think that's the core of what we're doing here at Americans for Limited Government. We want to maximize individual freedom and liberty, and just we want people to be their best, be able to attain their best self, and not be encumbered or hurt by big government policies and restrictions. So I really appreciate your message here today, Anna. And just in closing, is there anything you would like to add, something I haven't asked that is important to share?
No, I would just say to everyone, I'm sure, I would just say, just try to be inclusive to my generation. I think we are willing to learn and to explore information, and we're very well aware that mainstream media and our local news is not always the most reliable source. So we're willing to put ourselves out there. We're willing to be educated, and I think we should be able to have good discussions moving forward for the benefit of our country.
Well, thank you again, Anna. We really appreciate you joining us, and we'll close it out, and we'll see you all next time on an Americans for Limited Government live stream.
Thank you.